Hi guys, welcome back. Now we're going to be starting with supply. We're already done with demand, and when we talk about when we were talking about demand, we were looking at the consumer's perspective, but supply concerns a firm's perspective, right? So demand was focusing on the consumer buying the product at different prices. So supply will focus on firms selling the product at different prices, right? So the definition of supply goes like this: that supply is basically the willingness and the ability to simply sell a product at different prices. Now, a lot of times, usually people confuse supply with production. See, production and supply is slightly different because supply is influenced by the amount, supply is influenced by the amount produced, but is not the same as production because some of the amount that is produced today may be stored to be sold at a later date, right? Or it may also be that some of the output that is offered for sale today may have been come from the stocks that were stored before. So what you need to know is that supply is influenced by, yes, the amount produced, but it is not the same as production. Just like we were talking about demand being related to price, but it was indirectly related, but supply is directly related to price. That is, if the price would go up, people would be supplying more, the quantity supplied would rise. When the price would go down, the quantity supplied would go down. And we look at this in the next video, the reason behind it when we study extension and contraction and supply. But if you look at different prices, right? Let's say at $5. So at $5, you're supplying 10 units. You're sort of producing and selling 10 units. Let's say at $6, you're producing and selling 12 units. And at $8, let's say you're producing and selling. Here we are just assuming that whatever we're producing, all of it we're selling. So at $8, you're producing and selling 15 units, right? So you can clearly see that as the price is going up, firms are producing and selling more. So they're supplying more simply, right? That's what supply is. So as the price is going up, they're supplying more. And one of the reasons that we could understand is that here the price is the price that the producer is receiving. So the higher the price they receive, the more their incentive to produce, simply, right? The more their incentive to produce and sell, or simply the more their incentive to supply. Right, guys? Another thing so what we learn is that price and quantity supplied are directly related. If the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. If the price goes down, the quantity supplied goes down. So there's a direct relation with price, right? Now, what you also need to know is that since this would be a short video, you need to know the difference between individual supply and market supply, just like we studied market demand and individual demand. So here you have two producers, producer A and producer B, and they're supplying respectively at different prices. So at a price of $5, producer A and B are supplying 10 and 11. At a price of 6, they're supplying 12 and 12. Let's say at a price of 7, 14 and 15. And if you sum that up, you get a market supply at $5 21, at $6 24. At 7, you get a market supply of 29. So individual supply is simply the supply of one particular producer or one particular firm, while market supply is the total supply of the product supplied by all the firms in the industry. And here we have assumed there are only two firms in the industry, but there could be multiple and many. So guys, market supply is calculated in just the similar way that we were calculating to the market demand. But what you're essentially doing is that, the quantities are aggregated up. The quantities that would be supplied by each firm are added up. The quantities that would be supplied by each firm at each price are simply added up. So the aggregation of the supply of each individual firm, right, is the aggregation, the adding up of the supply of each individual firm gives us the market supply. And this is basically this is known as a supply schedule. A supply schedule is showing you the different quantities that would be supplied by firms, or it could be, if let's say you don't have the firms here, you could directly show the price and the quantity supplied by the market. So supply schedule is simply records the different quantities that are supplied at different prices. That's all what a supply schedule is, right, guys? Now in the next video, we're going to be discussing about the extension and contraction in supply and the reasons why this basically happens, why is the supply go upward sloping. So stay tuned for this video, share this channel with your friends. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.